Good morning. My name is EWhitefield, and I am an applied technology student who is focusing in on web design and back-end design in engineering. This week, I have selected the class selectors versus ID selectors topic because I find this one really kind of fun. It's one of the things I enjoy about CSS is the ability to change formatting based on the different identifications or selectors that we give to our different elements. And so I just kind of wanted to go over what a class selector is, what an ID selector is, and how do those work together in making our code highly formatable. So a class selector basically is used to identify elements in the HTML code that use the same formatting. And the thing that's cool about this is that it applies to multiple different elements. Whatever is given the class selector in the same name can have the same formatting in the document. It automatically selects those elements based on class equals and whatever we name that particular class. So it allows us to use that across multiple different elements. So we can have paragraphs that are identified by that class, or we can have mains identified by that. But whatever is given that class selector name will be selected to have the formatting of that in that CSS code. Sometimes it's called dot notation because it uses the dot in front of the class name. The other type, again, is the ID selector, and this one is used by the hashtag or the pound sign or whatever the many various names that this goes by. But essentially, it's identified by hash and the name of the ID in the CSS document. Now, the one thing that's important about an ID selector is that it is unique. It can only be used once in each HTML page. So the thing that you need to remember is that you can only use that once per whatever. Now, I will tell you from experience that it is possible to use multiple cases of the same ID. Now, the cool thing about the ID selector is that you can give something a class selector name and you can give it an ID selector name. And the reason that that's cool is because it allows us to use the class selector to give general formatting instructions, but then we can use that ID selector to modify some of those characteristics for that specific element. And I'll show you what that's like in a minute. So let's take a look at the code. So here I've got some basic HTML, but here's what's cool. So in the code, I have identified a class called instructions. I have identified a class called formatting. I have identified an ID called division, another class called formatting2, and another ID down here at the bottom that is the ending ID. And I'm going to use all these to show different examples of how class selectors and ID selectors work. Now, all of this code right here gives me this document right here. It's not fancy, it doesn't look great, but hey, it gives you all the information. These yellow sections, those just identify so that you can see what each section has. Like this, for instance, is using a class selector for formatting 1. This one is using an ID selector for division, etc. So you can see what's going to happen when I make all of these changes. So let's take a look at the CSS code. The CSS code is pretty basic. I didn't put anything fancy in here. I gave the body some instructions because I wanted to limit the size of my example, mostly so that I can move this over here and you can see my code. All right, so you can see my code and you can see what the result is. Again, with the main, I'm just trying to give it some contrast from the body to kind of highlight what we're doing. Everything right now at this point in time is this bisque color, but let's take a look. One of the things that we can do is we can look at the classes. Remember back here we had a formatting class for the heading, and we use that same formatting instruction. Well, we only use that right there. So let's take a look at what that does for us. So if we change that and we take off the formatting for and we save that and we come back to it, we can see that by changing that one class ID, I was able to change the formatting of the header. So again, if I go back, you can see here it's italicized, it's in Times Roman, I think is what the default is. and there's no background. It's just the same as the rest. But if I come back in here and I change that out, I can now see that, oh, okay, yep, that heading has changed. And so only that heading has changed. I changed nothing in my HTML code. All I did was I changed some CSS, and I got the result that I was looking for. Now I can also do the same by using an ID selector like I did for division. You see here, division covers everything in this one section. It's all these two paragraphs right here. So it'd be these two paragraphs right here. So if I come in and I remove the division comment, now you're going to see, oh, there's the division, and you can see how it's got a background color of crimson, and it's also got a width of 450 versus the background width of 600 that I put into this. So it shortens it. You can see it's shortened up now, and the text has gotten a little bit shorter, and it's, you know, just a different set of formats. Now I can make additional changes like I did here by going in and saying, okay, well, that's all well and good, but I want my paragraphs to be a little bit different than the background. I want them to have a different formatting. Why? I don't know. I'm just kind of crazy that way. So I can change that again by using that class. And now I've got this cornflower blue. I've changed it to Courier because I kind of like that monospacing font. And I've got the font size is small. And, you know, for one more change, let's just go real quick and we'll put in font style. And we'll make that normal. Again, because the italics looked a little weird. So now we've got that changed. Sorry, the voice gets a little bit raspy sometimes. All right, so now we've got that changed. Now, one of the things that I put in here, just because I wanted to see it, I wanted my ending to be different. I wanted this this part here to be a little bit more impactful. So what I did is I gave it a special ID. I used the ID selector instead of the class one. Could have used either one, but I used ID in this case. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to change that to this impact font. I've also got the border around here because, you know, I wanted it separated so that it kind of ties back to the heading, you know, that it's separated by the blueness, and I've got this blue border around it to kind of make it kind of cool and exciting. Now, here's the last part, and this is why I love having class selectors and ID selectors. I, for some reason, have decided I want this paragraph. If you look here, I've identified it by having the class ID or the class selector and an ID selector. So it's got formatting too, and it's got special. And I've decided, well, what I want to do is I want to change what's in here. I want to change the font to be a little bit different. I want it to be a separate font that's larger and lighter, because you know, this Courier one is great, but for this paragraph, maybe I had something special in here that I wanted to do. So I'm going to put this code in. And I save that change, and you can see now that I've still got the formatting, but now I've got it set up for the special. And you can see that now what has happened is that that the font has changed to the impact. It's still got the blue background from the formatting, but now it's got a different font and it's, you know, different lettering. I can change this to be smaller. And there we go. Or I can just, you know, take that out altogether and let it be normal. I can do whatever I want, and I can have this now formatted exactly the way that I want it. I have my overall formatting 1. I've got my special formatting 2. I've got the special, or my regular formatting 2, and then I've got the special formatting 2. I've selected my ending. This is what is cool about these, use of selectors, is I can use them to really fine tune what I am doing in my document. So that's my presentation for today, and I wanted to thank you all for coming, and you have a great week.